She swore she would never marry. The king left her no choice. But on her wedding night, Diana discovered the Duke's terrible secret, a secret that could destroy them both, or save her from a fate worse than death. Welcome to Thornfield Manor, where the past refuses to stay buried. If you love gothic romance, suspense, and forbidden love, subscribe now and comment where you're watching from.
I walk through halls of whisper lies, where shadows
Let's begin.
breathe and
The letter arrived on a morning that smelled of rain and ruin. Diana Hartley stood by the window of her modest townhouse in London, fingers trembling as she broke the royal seal. The parchment was heavy, expensive, the kind that carried weight beyond words. By order of His Majesty King George III, her breath caught. Lady Diana Hartley is hereby commanded to enter into marriage with His Grace Victor Ashford, Duke of Thornfield, for the benefit of the crown and the unity of... The rest blurred. Marriage. The one thing she had sworn, on her sister's grave, on her mother's memory, on every shattered piece of her broken childhood, never to accept. No. The word fell from her lips like a stone into still water, rippling outward into the silence of the empty room. But the king's command was not a request, it was a sentence. Diana had fled to London 3 years ago, escaping the country estate where her father's cruelty had painted every wall with fear. She had watched her elder sister, Catherine, wither in a loveless marriage, watched the light drain from her eyes, the bruises hidden beneath silk sleeves, the forced smiles at dinner parties. Catherine had died in childbirth at 22. Diana had been 18. She made her vow that night, kneeling beside her sister's cold body. I will never belong to a man. Never. She had built a life here, small, quiet, hers. She tutored young ladies in French and drawing. She read late into the night. She walked the parks alone, free. And now this. You cannot refuse the king. Lady Pembroke, her only remaining aunt, stood in the doorway, her face lined with something between pity and resignation. I can, Diana said, though her voice shook. I will. Then you condemn yourself to ruin. Her aunt's tone was not unkind, only factual. The king does not offer choices, Diana. He dictates them. Diana turned back to the window. Outside, London churned. Carriages, vendors, life moving forward without her. Who is he? She asked quietly. This Duke. Her aunt hesitated. Victor Ashford, widower. His estate borders the king's hunting grounds. The crown needs his loyalty and... She paused. And he needs an heir. His first wife? Silence. Diana looked over her shoulder. Her aunt's expression had shuttered. Careful. She died. 2 years ago. How? Does it matter? Diana's stomach twisted. It does if I'm to take her place. Her aunt crossed the room, placed a hand on Diana's shoulder, a rare gesture of affection. Listen to me, child. I know what you fear, but Victor Ashford is not your father. He is cold, yes, distant, but he is not cruel. Cold men can be the cruelest, Diana whispered. Her aunt said nothing, because they both knew it was true. The wedding was arranged for 3 weeks hence. Diana spent those weeks like a prisoner awaiting execution, numb, detached, moving through the motions of fittings and preparations, as though watching herself from a great distance. The tongue whispered, of course. They always did. Poor Lady Diana, married off to the haunted Duke. They say Thornfield Manor is cursed. His first wife went mad, you know, locked herself in the tower and... Diana stopped listening. She had learned long ago that gossip was a poison that seeped into everything if you let it. But the word mad clung to her thoughts like a shadow. On the eve of her wedding, Diana received a letter. No seal, no signature, just 5 words scrawled in an unsteady hand. Do not marry him. Run. Her hands shook as she held the paper to the candlelight, searching for some clue, some explanation. None came. She burned the letter, but the words stayed. The ceremony was held at St. George's Chapel, small and cold despite the summer heat. Diana wore ivory silk that felt like a shroud. Victor Ashford stood at the altar, tall and imposing in midnight blue, his face carved from stone. He did not look at her as she approached. His jaw was tight, his hands clasped behind his back as though restraining something. She studied him as the priest droned on. He was handsome, she supposed, in a brutal sort of way. Sharp cheekbones, dark hair swept back, eyes the color of a winter storm. But there was no warmth in him, no softness. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to feel. When the priest prompted him to speak, his voice was low, clipped. "I do." 2 words, delivered like an obligation. Diana's turn. Her mouth went dry. She thought of Catherine, of her father, of the letter, run. But there was nowhere to run to. "I do," she whispered. The priest pronounced them man and wife. Victor did not kiss her. He simply turned, offered his arm with mechanical precision, and led her out of the chapel into the blinding daylight. The carriage ride to Thornfield Manor took 4 hours. Victor sat across from her, silent, staring out the window as the city gave way to countryside, rolling hills, dense woods, estates hidden behind iron gates. Diana tried to speak twice. Both times, the words died in her throat. Finally, as dusk began to fall and the shadows grew long, she forced herself to break the silence. "Your Grace." "Victor." His gaze snapped to hers, sharp and sudden. "You are my wife now. You will call me Victor." There was no affection in the command, only statement. Diana swallowed. "Victor, then. I would like to know what is expected of me." His expression did not change. "You will oversee the household, attend social functions when required, produce an heir." The bluntness of it struck her like a slap. "And beyond that," she asked, her voice steadier than she felt, "beyond that, you are free to do as you wish. The manor is large. You will have your own rooms, your own life." "A marriage in name only, then?" Something flickered in his eyes, too fast to name. "Yes." She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt only cold. Thornfield Manor appeared through the mist like something out of a Gothic novel, tall, grey, severe. Ivy crawled up the stone walls like grasping fingers. Windows stared down at them, dark and empty. A shiver ran through her. "It's imposing," she said carefully. "It's home." The way he said it, flat, without warmth, made her wonder if he truly believed that. The carriage stopped. A small staff waited at the entrance. An elderly housekeeper, 2 maids, a valet. Their faces were polite, respectful, but their eyes held something else. Pity. The housekeeper stepped forward, curtsied deeply. "Your Grace, welcome to Thornfield. I am Mrs. Pemberton. If you need anything—" "Thank you," Diana said softly. Mrs. Pemberton's gaze flicked to Victor, then back to Diana. "I've prepared the Duchess's chambers. 3rd floor, East Wing." "The East Wing," Victor said sharply, "is off limits." Silence. Mrs. Pemberton paled. "Of course, Your Grace. Forgive me. I meant the South Wing." Victor's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Diana felt the tension coil around them like smoke. "Come," he said to Diana. "I'll show you to your rooms." He led her through corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, portraits of stern ancestors watching from the walls, candelabras casting flickering shadows, the scent of old wood, and something faintly floral. Roses, maybe, or lilies. They stopped at a heavy oak door. Victor pushed it open. The room beyond was beautiful, pale blue wallpaper, a 4-poster bed draped in white linen, tall windows overlooking the gardens. A fire crackled in the hearth. "Your chambers," he said. Diana stepped inside, running her fingers along the edge of a writing desk. "And yours?" she asked. "Across the hall." Close, but separate. She turned to face him, searching his expression for something, anything, that might tell her who he truly was beneath the ice. "Victor, why did you agree to this marriage?" For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, "The king does not ask. He commands." That's not an answer. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something raw beneath the surface. Grief, maybe, or guilt. "No," he said quietly. "It's not." He turned to leave. "Wait." He paused, hand on the doorframe. Diana's heart pounded. "The East Wing. Why is it forbidden?" His shoulders tensed. "Because," he said, his voice low and edged with something dark, "there are things in this house that you are better off not knowing." And then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Diana stood alone in the silent room, the fire crackling, the shadows dancing. And somewhere deep within the manor she heard it, A sound, faint, distant. A woman's voice. Crying. Diana did not sleep that night. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the canopy above her, listening to the manor breathe around her. The creak of floorboards, the whisper of wind through ancient walls, the settling of stone that had stood for centuries. And beneath it all, that sound, distant, muffled. A woman weeping. She told herself it was the wind. Old houses made strange noises. Her mind was playing tricks, exhausted from the day's upheaval, but she knew the difference between wind and human grief. Someone was crying, and no one had mentioned it. Morning came grey and cold. Diana dressed herself. There had been no maid assigned to her yet, and descended the main staircase, following the faint smell of tea and toast toward what she assumed was the dining room. She found Victor already seated, reading the morning paper with mechanical precision. He did not look up as she entered. "Good morning," she said quietly. "Morning." His tone was clipped, distant. A servant appeared, a young maid with nervous eyes, and poured Diana tea without meeting her gaze. Diana studied her. "What is your name?" The girl startled. "Letty, Your Grace." "Thank you, Letty." The maid curtsied quickly and retreated, glancing at Victor as though expecting reprimand. Diana frowned. "Is there a reason the staff seems frightened?" she asked. Victor lowered his paper, his expression unreadable. "They are not frightened. They are respectful. There's a difference between respect and fear." His jaw tightened. "Perhaps. But in this house, the line is thin." She wanted to press further, but something in his eyes warned her not to. Instead, she sipped her tea and asked, "Will you show me the grounds today? I have business in the village. Then I will explore on my own." His gaze sharpened. "Stay out of the east wing." "You said that last night. I will say it as many times as necessary." The steel in his voice left no room for argument. Diana set down her cup, meeting his stare with her own quiet defiance. "I am not a child to be ordered about, Victor. If there is danger, tell me what it is." "There is no danger," he said flatly. "Only matters that do not concern you. I am your wife. Everything in this house concerns me now." For a moment something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps or reluctant admiration. Then it was gone, replaced by the familiar coldness. "Do not go to the east wing, Diana. That is my final word on the matter." He stood, folded his paper with precise edges, and left the room without another glance. Diana sat alone in the silence, her tea growing cold. She had been in this house less than 12 hours, and already she felt like a ghost, seen but not acknowledged, present but unwelcome. She thought of her small London townhouse, her quiet freedom, and she wondered if she had traded one prison for another. After breakfast, Diana explored. The manor was vast, too large for the small staff she had seen. Rooms upon rooms sat unused, furniture draped in white cloth like shrouded corpses. Dust motes danced in the shafts of pale light that struggled through heavy curtains. It felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum. She found the library on the second floor, a towering room lined floor to ceiling with books smelling of leather and old paper. A portrait hung above the fireplace. A woman in pale blue blonde hair swept elegantly back, eyes soft and sad. Diana moved closer, studying the face. The nameplate read, "Eleanor Ashford, Duchess of Thornfield, Victor's first wife." She was beautiful, delicate, ethereal, the kind of beauty that seemed fragile as though a strong wind might shatter her. Diana stared at those painted eyes and felt an uncomfortable prickle of unease. This woman had lived here, slept in these rooms, walked these halls, and then she had died. How? The question gnawed at her. She was kind. Diana spun around. Mrs. Pemberton stood in the doorway, hands folded neatly in front of her. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I did not mean to startle you." Diana pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her breath. "It's all right, I was just admiring the portrait." Mrs. Pemberton stepped into the room, her gaze lifting to the painting with an expression Diana could not quite read. Sorrow, perhaps, mingled with something heavier. "The late Duchess," the housekeeper said softly. "She loved this library, spent hours here reading. She was gentle. Too gentle for this place, some said." "What happened to her?" Mrs. Pemberton's lips pressed into a thin line. "She took ill, a fever of the mind, the doctors called it. She deteriorated. A fever of the mind? Delusions, confusion. She stopped recognizing his grace, stopped eating, stopped speaking. The housekeeper's voice dropped. In the end, she simply faded. Diana's chest tightened. That must have been terrible for everyone. It was hardest on his grace. Mrs. Pemberton's gaze returned to Diana, sharp now. He blamed himself. Still does, I think. Why would he blame himself? The housekeeper hesitated as though weighing how much to say. Because he could not save her, she said finally. And a man like the Duke, he does not forgive himself for failure. Diana looked back at the portrait, at Eleanor's sad eyes. Where is she buried? The family chapel, east side of the estate. May I visit? Mrs. Pemberton's expression shifted, something like warning. Of course, Your Grace. Though I would advise waiting until His Grace returns, he does not like intrusions. It's a grave, not a fortress. Perhaps, but grief makes fortresses of many things. Before Diana could respond, a sound echoed faintly from somewhere above them. A thud. Then a muffled cry, high, anguished. Diana's head snapped up. What was that? Mrs. Pemberton's face went carefully blank. The wind, Your Grace. The manor is old. It makes noise. That was not the wind. Your Grace, and I heard it last night too, someone is crying. The housekeeper's hands tightened in front of her. You are tired. The journey was long. Sometimes exhaustion plays tricks on the mind. Diana stepped closer, lowering her voice. Mrs. Pemberton, I'm not a fool. If someone in this house needs help, no one needs help. The words came sharp, final. And I would advise you, Your Grace, to let some questions remain unanswered. The coldness in her tone startled Diana into silence. Mrs. Pemberton curtsied stiffly. If you'll excuse me, I have duties to attend to. She left before Diana could protest. Diana stood alone in the library, her heart pounding, the painted eyes of Eleanor Ashford watching her from the wall. That afternoon, Diana walked the gardens. They were beautiful but neglected, roses growing wild, hedges untrimmed, pathways choked with weeds. She wandered deeper, past a stone fountain where moss had claimed the edges, until she reached a small iron gate. Beyond it, a narrow path led toward a cluster of trees, and beyond the trees, barely visible through the branches, a stone structure. The chapel. Diana glanced back at the manor. No one was watching. She pushed open the gate and followed the path. The chapel was small, ancient, its walls covered in ivy. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of damp stone. Light filtered through stained glass, casting colored shadows across the floor. Graves lined the walls, generations of Ashfords, their names carved into marble. And at the far end, a newer stone. Fresh flowers lay wilted at its base. Diana knelt, reading the inscription, Eleanor Margaret Ashford, beloved wife, 1803, 1824. May she find the peace. She could not keep the words struck her as strange. Peace she could not keep. Not rest in peace, not gone, but not forgotten. As though Eleanor had been at war with something. Diana reached out, brushing her fingers across the cold stone. I'm sorry, she whispered. Whatever happened to you, I'm sorry. A branch snapped behind her. She shot to her feet, spinning around. Victor stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the fading afternoon light. His expression was unreadable, but his body was tense, coiled, like a predator deciding whether to strike or retreat. I told you to stay away, he said quietly. Diana lifted her chin. You told me to stay out of the East Wing. You said nothing about the chapel. Do not play semantics with me, Diana. Then do not treat me like a prisoner. His eyes flashed, anger or something deeper. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides, stopping close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the faint scent of cedar and rain. You do not understand what you are meddling with, he said, his voice low and rough. Then explain it to me. I cannot or will not. His jaw clenched. For a moment she thought he might shout, might finally crack the iron control he wore like armor. Instead, he exhaled slowly, stepping back. This place, this house, it is not what you think. What is it then? He looked at Eleanor's grave, his expression softening into something unbearably sad. A tomb, he said simply. for the living and the dead alike. Diana's breath caught. Before she could respond, he turned and walked out, leaving her alone among the stones and shadows. That night, Diana lay awake again. She listened to the house, and this time, she did not tell herself it was the wind, because the sound was clearer now, closer. A woman's voice weeping, and it was coming from the east wing. Diana threw back the covers, lit a candle, and stepped into the dark hallway. She knew she was defying him. She knew there would be consequences. But she could not, would not, live in a house full of ghosts without knowing their names. The corridor stretched before her, long and shadowed, and at the far end, a door stood slightly ajar. Light flickered from within. Diana moved toward it, her heart hammering, the candle trembling in her hand. She reached the door, pushed it open, and froze. Inside the room, a narrow staircase spiraled upward into darkness. The sound was louder now, sobbing, raw and broken, coming from above, from the tower. Diana took a breath and began to climb. End of Chapter 2, 1897 words, proceeding to Chapter 3 in 30 seconds, Forbidden Rooms. The stairs were narrow, worn smooth by time and use. Diana climbed slowly, one hand braced against the cold stone wall, the candle casting dancing shadows that made the darkness seem alive. The sobbing grew louder with each step, raw, desperate, the sound of someone beyond consolation. Her pulse thundered in her ears. What if Victor found her here? What if she was walking into something dangerous, something she could not undo? But she had never been good at turning away from suffering. Catherine had taught her that. Her sister's silent agony endured behind closed doors while the world pretended not to see. Diana would not pretend, not anymore. She reached the top of the stairs. A heavy wooden door stood before her, iron bolts drawn across it. Light seeped from the gap beneath. The crying stopped. Silence, thick, suffocating. Diana's hand hovered over the bolt, trembling. Then from the other side of the door, a voice, soft, broken. "Who's there?" Diana's breath caught. "I..." Her voice came out barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb you." Silence again. Then, "Are you real?" The question sent a chill down Diana's spine. "Yes," she said carefully. "I'm real." A sound, rustling, movement, footsteps approaching the door. "They don't come anymore," the voice continued, fractured and distant as though speaking from underwater. "Only him. And he never stays long." Diana pressed her palm against the door. "Who are you?" A pause. "I used to know. I think I used to know." Tears pricked Diana's eyes. The grief in that voice, the confusion, the fear, it was unbearable. "Can I see you?" Diana asked gently. "No." The word came sharp, panicked. "No, you mustn't. He'll be angry. He's always angry when they come." "I won't tell him. He always knows." Diana closed her eyes, her heart breaking for this woman, whoever she was, trapped in this tower, forgotten by everyone except the ghosts of her own mind. "What's your name?" Diana tried again. Silence. Then, so faint Diana almost missed it. Isabel. The name struck her like a blow. Not Eleanor. Isabel. Victor's first wife wasn't dead. She was here, alive, imprisoned. Diana stumbled backward, her candle nearly falling from her shaking hand. This couldn't be real. Victor had married her, the king had sanctioned it. There had been a funeral, flowers on a grave, a headstone with Eleanor's name. Wait. Eleanor. Not Isabel. Diana's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments. "Isabel," she whispered through the door. Are you the Duchess?" A soft, broken laugh. "I was. Once. When I remembered how to be. But the grave. I saw a grave. Eleanor Ashford. Eleanor." The name was spoken like a prayer, or a curse. "She was kind. She tried to help me, but she couldn't stop it. No one could." "Stop what?" "The shadows, the poison, the way the walls close in and the voices whisper and..." Her voice cracked. I can't remember what's real anymore." Diana pressed her forehead against the door, tears streaming down her face. "I'm going to help you," she said fiercely. "I promise, I'm going to..." "Diana." The voice came from behind her, low, cold, deadly. She whirled around. Victor stood at the bottom of the stairs, his face a mask of fury barely contained. The candlelight carved harsh shadows across his features, making him look like something carved from stone and wrath. "Step away from the door." His tone left no room for argument. Diana didn't move. "She's alive," she said, her voice shaking. "Your wife is alive, and you've locked her in a tower like some kind of monster." His eyes darkened. "You know nothing. Then tell me." "Step away from the door." The command in his voice was absolute. But Diana had spent her whole life bowing to men who demanded obedience. Not anymore. No. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or reluctant respect. Then it hardened again. He climbed the stairs, slow and deliberate, each footfall echoing like a death knell. Diana's heart hammered, but she held her ground. He stopped inches from her, towering, his presence overwhelming. "Move," he said softly, "or I will move you. You won't hurt me." She didn't know where the certainty came from, but it rang true. His jaw clenched. "No, I won't. But I will carry you out of here if I must. And I will lock you in your chambers until you learn that some doors are closed for a reason. She's suffering. I know. Then let me help her." "You cannot." "Why not?" "Because she is beyond help." The words tore from him, raw and anguished. "Because I have tried. God knows I have tried, and there is nothing left to save." The pain in his voice stopped her cold. For the first time she saw past the ice, past the control, to the man beneath, broken, grieving, drowning in guilt he couldn't escape. "Tell me," she whispered. "Please, tell me what happened." He stared at her for a long moment, something warring behind his eyes. Then he exhaled, a sound like defeat. "Come," he said quietly. "Not here." He turned and descended the stairs. Diana glanced back at the door, at the silence beyond it. "I'll come back," she whispered. "I promise." Then she followed him. Victor led her to his study, a dark, wood-paneled room lined with books and maps, a fire burning low in the hearth. He poured himself a glass of brandy, drank it in one swift motion, then poured another. He did not offer her one. He stood with his back to her, staring into the flames. Diana waited, her heart still racing. Finally, he spoke. "Her name is Isabel Ashford. She was my wife." "Was?" "In every way that matters, yes." His voice was flat, emotionless. "The woman you heard tonight is not the woman I married." "What happened to her?" He turned, and the look in his eyes was haunted. "I don't know." "You must have some idea." "I don't know, Diana." The words came sharp, desperate. One day she was well, laughing, whole. And then, slowly, piece by piece, she began to unravel. Diana sank into a chair, her legs unsteady. "What do you mean, unravel?" Victor set down his glass, running a hand through his hair. It started small, forgetting things, misplacing objects. She would ask me the same question 3 times in an hour. I thought she was tired, distracted. He paused, his throat working. Then came the nightmares. She would wake screaming, clawing at the walls, convinced that someone was in the room with us. I would hold her, tell her she was safe, but she wouldn't recognize me. She would look at me as though I were a stranger. Or worse, a threat. Diana's chest tightened. The doctors came, one after another. They bled her, gave her tonics, powders, treatments that only seemed to make it worse. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She would wander the halls at night, barefoot, talking to people who weren't there. His voice cracked. One night I found her in the kitchen, holding a knife to her own throat. She was weeping, begging me to let her die. She said the voices wouldn't stop, that the shadows were eating her alive. Tears slipped down Diana's cheeks. I couldn't let her hurt herself. I couldn't let her... I had no choice but to move her to the tower. It was the only room I could secure, the only place where she couldn't... He stopped, his hands fisting at his sides, where she couldn't end her suffering. "And Eleanor," Diana whispered. Victor's expression softened, grief etched into every line. Eleanor was Isabel's younger sister. She came to help care for her. She was the only one Isabel would tolerate near her. But watching her sister deteriorate... He shook his head. It destroyed Eleanor. She developed a fever, a real one this time. Within weeks she was gone. Diana covered her mouth, a sob catching in her throat. So I lost them both, Victor said quietly. One to madness, one to grief. And I was left here in this tomb with a wife who doesn't know my name and a ghost who haunts every room. Silence settled between them, heavy as stone. Diana wiped her eyes, steadying her voice. Why didn't you tell me? Because it is not your burden to bear. I'm your wife, in name only. His gaze met hers, raw and unguarded. You did not ask for this. You did not ask for a husband with a mad wife hidden in his attic. You deserve better than this nightmare. And yet here I am, Diana said softly. He said nothing. She rose, crossing the space between them. Victor, I cannot imagine what you've endured, but locking her away, isolating yourself, it will destroy you. It already is. What would you have me do? His voice was hoarse. The asylums are places of horror. I cannot send her there. I will not. I'm not asking you to. Then what? Diana took a breath. Let me see her. Let me try to help. No. Why not? Because she is dangerous. To herself, to others. I'm not afraid. You should be. I've lived with fear my whole life, Victor. Her voice was steady now, fierce. I know what it looks like. And that woman upstairs is not dangerous. She's suffering. There's a difference. He stared at her, something shifting in his expression. Disbelief, hope, fear, all tangled together. You don't know what you're asking. Then show me. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. Tomorrow, in the daylight. And you will do exactly as I say. Agreed. He looked at her as though seeing her for the first time, truly seeing her. You are not what I expected, he said quietly. Neither are you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, sad and fleeting. Get some rest, Diana. Tomorrow will not be easy. She nodded, turning toward the door. Diana. She paused, looking back. Thank you, he said, for not running. Her throat tightened. I told you, she said softly. I don't run anymore. That night, Diana lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. She thought of Isabel trapped in that tower. She thought of Eleanor dead from a broken heart. She thought of Victor carrying the weight of both their ghosts. And she made a silent vow. She would not let this house claim another soul, not if she could help it. Somewhere in the East Wing, a woman wept. But this time, Diana did not feel afraid. She felt determined. Morning came pale and hesitant, as though the sun itself was reluctant to touch Thornfield Manor. Diana dressed carefully, choosing a simple gown of deep green, practical, not ornamental. She braided her hair back, pinned it securely. Whatever awaited her in that tower, she would face it clear-eyed and steady. She found Victor waiting in the corridor outside her door. He looked as though he hadn't slept, shadows beneath his eyes, jaw tight with tension. But his gaze was clear, resolute. Are you certain? He asked quietly. Yes. He studied her for a moment longer, as though searching for cracks in her resolve. He would find none. Follow me, he said. And remember, do not approach her directly. Do not touch her. If she becomes agitated, you leave immediately, no arguments. Understood. They walked through the manor in silence, their footsteps echoing on the marble floors. The staff they passed quickly averted their eyes, as though pretending not to see. Diana wondered how long they had kept this secret, how long they had lived in a house haunted by a woman no one spoke of. Victor stopped at the door concealing the spiral staircase. He withdrew a key from his pocket, iron, heavy, old. Once we go up, he said, his voice low, there is no pretending this away. You will see things that cannot be unseen. I know. He unlocked the door. The staircase yawned before them, narrow and dark. Diana's heart beat faster, but she did not hesitate. She followed him up. At the top, Victor paused before the bolted door. From within, silence. Isabel, he called softly. It's Victor. I'm coming in. I've brought someone. A friend. She won't hurt you. No response. Victor drew back the bolts, 3 of them, heavy iron, and pushed the door open. The room beyond was not what Diana expected. It was comfortable. Sunlight streamed through a large window overlooking the gardens. A bed stood against one wall, neatly made with soft linens. A chair sat beside it, cushions embroidered with flowers. Books lined a small shelf. Watercolor paintings hung on the walls, landscapes mostly, delicate and sad, and in the center of the room, seated on the floor with her knees drawn to her chest, was a woman. She was thin, too thin, her blonde hair hanging loose and tangled around her shoulders. She wore a simple white nightgown, clean but worn. Her feet were bare, but it was her eyes that struck Diana most. Wide, blue, beautiful, and utterly lost. She looked up as they entered, her gaze drifting past Victor to settle on Diana. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice soft and childlike. Diana's throat tightened. "My name is Diana." "Diana," Isabel repeated, as though testing the word. "That's a pretty name, like the goddess." "Yes." Diana took a cautious step forward. "Like the goddess." Isabel tilted her head, studying her with an intensity that was both curious and unnerving. "Are you real? Sometimes they send me people who aren't real. They look real, but then they fade, or they say terrible things, and I know they're just shadows." "I'm real," Diana said gently. "I promise." Isabel's gaze shifted to Victor, and something in her expression changed, fear or perhaps confusion. "I know you," she whispered. You're someone important, but I can't remember why." Victor's face remained carefully neutral, but Diana saw the pain flash across his eyes. "It's all right," he said quietly. "You don't have to remember." Isabel looked down at her hands, twisting her fingers together. "The shadows tell me I did something terrible, that I hurt people. Did I hurt you?" "No," Victor said firmly. "You never hurt me." "But I hurt someone." "No." "Then why am I here?" Her voice broke. "Why am I locked away like something dangerous?" Diana's chest ached. Victor crouched slowly, keeping his distance but lowering himself to her level. "Because you were unwell," he said gently. "And I needed to keep you safe, from yourself and from those who might not understand." Isabel's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home." "You are home." "No." She shook her head, agitated now. "No, this isn't home. Home was... It was somewhere bright, somewhere warm. There was music and laughter and..." She stopped, her expression crumpling. I can't remember what it felt like to be whole." A tear slipped down Diana's cheek. She took another step forward, ignoring Victor's warning glance. "Isabel," she said softly, "may I sit with you?" Isabel looked up, surprised. "You want to stay?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because no one should be alone." For a long moment, Isabel simply stared at her. Then slowly, she nodded. Diana lowered herself to the floor, a respectful distance away, and folded her hands in her lap. Isabel watched her with a mixture of wonder and wariness. "You're not afraid of me," she said quietly. "No. You should be. The shadows say I'm dangerous. The shadows lie." Isabel blinked, as though the concept had never occurred to her. "Do they?" "Yes." A faint, fragile smile touched Isabel's lips. "You're kind. Like Eleanor. She was kind too." Diana's heart squeezed. "I've heard about Eleanor. She loved you very much." "She did." Isabel's expression grew distant. "She used to read to me. Stories about faraway places. She said one day we'd go together, see the world beyond these walls, but then..." Her voice trailed off. "Then she left. Everyone leaves." "Not everyone," Diana said quietly. Isabel's gaze returned to her, searching. "Will you leave?" Diana glanced at Victor, who stood silent and still by the door, watching them with an expression she couldn't quite name. She looked back at Isabel. "No," she said. "I won't leave." They stayed for an hour. Diana spoke softly, asking gentle questions. What Isabel liked to paint, what stories she remembered, what the view from her window looked like in different seasons. Isabel responded slowly, cautiously, like a wild animal learning to trust. And gradually something in her eased. The tension in her shoulders softened. Her voice grew steadier. She even laughed once, a small, surprised sound as though she'd forgotten she could. Victor said nothing, but Diana felt his gaze on her the entire time. When Isabel began to tire, her words slurring with exhaustion, Diana rose carefully. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said. "If you'd like." Isabel looked up at her, eyes wide and hopeful. "You will?" I promise. Do you keep your promises? Always. Isabel smiled, a real smile, tentative but genuine. Then I'd like that very much. Victor bolted the door behind them, his movements mechanical. They descended the stairs in silence. When they reached the corridor, he stopped, his back to her. You shouldn't have promised that, he said quietly. Why not? Because she will come to depend on you, and if you change your mind, if you decide this is too much. I won't. He turned, his expression unreadable. You barely know her. I know enough. Diana stepped closer. She's not mad, Victor. She's traumatized, confused, but she's still in there, still fighting. And she deserves someone to fight for her. His jaw clenched. I have been fighting for her for 2 years. I know. And you've kept her alive. But alive is not the same as living. The words hung between them, sharp and true. Victor looked away, his shoulders sagging. I don't know how to fix this, he said, his voice rough. I don't know how to bring her back. Maybe you can't, Diana said gently. Maybe no one can. But you can give her kindness, companionship, dignity. That's not nothing. He was silent for a long moment, then, why are you doing this? Diana thought of her sister, of the years Catherine spent trapped in a marriage that slowly killed her spirit, of how no one helped because no one wanted to see. Because someone should have done it for someone I loved, she said quietly. And no one did. Understanding flickered in Victor's eyes. He nodded slowly. Thank you, he said, for seeing her as human. Most wouldn't. Most are cowards. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. That evening, Diana sat in the library, trying to read but unable to focus. Her mind kept returning to that room in the tower, to Isabel's lost eyes, to the paintings on the walls, evidence of a woman who had once created beauty, who had once been whole. What had broken her? Victor said it happened slowly, but nothing happened without cause. Illness, trauma, poison. Something had stolen Isabel's mind, and Diana intended to find out what. She rose, scanning the shelves until she found what she was looking for: medical texts, journals on diseases of the mind, accounts of treatments and cures. She pulled down volume after volume, carrying them to the desk, and she began to read. Hours later, a knock startled her from her research. She looked up to find Victor in the doorway, still dressed, a glass of brandy in his hand. You should be asleep, he said. So should you. He stepped into the room, his gaze falling on the open books scattered across the desk. What are you doing? Research. Diana. There has to be an explanation, Victor. People don't simply lose their minds for no reason. Illness, injury, poison. Something caused this. He set down his glass, his expression darkening. The doctors found nothing. Then perhaps they weren't looking in the right places. He moved to the desk, looking down at the texts she'd gathered. You think I didn't try this? That I didn't spend months searching for answers? I think you were too close to see clearly, Diana said, rising to face him. I think grief and guilt clouded your judgment. But I have distance. I have fresh eyes. And what do you hope to find? The truth. His gaze held hers, something shifting in the depths, hope, maybe, or fear of hoping. You're relentless, he said quietly. I've been called worse. A genuine smile tugged at his lips this time, small but real. He reached out almost unconsciously and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle, so unexpected, that Diana froze. His hand lingered, fingertips brushing her cheek. You are remarkable, he whispered, and I do not deserve you. Her breath caught. Victor, this marriage was meant to be cold, transactional, a duty discharged. His thumb traced her jawline, his gaze intense. But you walk into every shadow without flinching. You offer kindness where others would offer judgment. And I find myself... He stopped, as though realizing he'd said too much. Diana's heart pounded. Find yourself what? She asked softly. He dropped his hand, stepping back. Grateful, he said finally. I find myself grateful you are here. It wasn't what he'd been about to say. She knew it. He knew she knew, but neither pushed. Good night, Diana, he said quietly. Good night. He left, taking the warmth of the room with him. Diana stood alone, her cheek still tingling where he'd touched her. and she realized, with a jolt of fear and exhilaration, she was beginning to care for him, not as a wife bound by duty, but as a woman drawn to a man she was only beginning to understand. A man haunted, broken, but fighting with every breath to do right by those he loved, even when it cost him everything. She returned to her books, but the words blurred, because the truth she'd come here seeking had split into two paths, the truth of what happened to Isabel, and the truth of what was happening to her own heart. Both terrified her, both demanded answers, and she would find them, no matter the cost. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Each morning Diana would climb the tower stairs and sit with Isabel. She brought books, read aloud, listened to the fragmented stories Isabel would tell, memories surfacing like debris from a shipwreck, incomplete and waterlogged, but precious nonetheless. Some days were good. Isabel would smile, ask questions, remember Diana's name without prompting. Other days were dark. She would rock back and forth, whispering to invisible voices, begging them to stop, to leave her alone, to let her sleep. On those days, Diana simply sat beside her in silence, a quiet presence in the chaos. Victor watched from the doorway, never entering fully, never speaking unless Isabel addressed him directly, which she rarely did. Diana understood why. Isabel didn't remember him as her husband. To her, he was a stranger who brought meals and medicines, who locked the door at night, a warden, however kind. It must have been agony for him, but he bore it without complaint. One afternoon, as Diana descended from the tower, she found Mrs. Pemberton waiting in the corridor. The housekeeper's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held something sharper. "A word, Your Grace." Diana nodded, following her to a small sitting room overlooking the gardens. Mrs. Pemberton closed the door, then turned to face her. "You've been spending a great deal of time with her." It wasn't a question. "Yes," Diana said simply. "May I ask why?" "Because she's alone. And lonely. And no one should have to endure that." Mrs. Pemberton studied her for a long moment. "You're different from the others," she said finally. "Others?" "Ladies who came before, friends of the family, distant relatives. They would visit once, look at her with pity or disgust and never return. But you..." She paused. "You keep coming back. Why wouldn't I?" "Because it's easier not to. Because most people cannot bear to sit with suffering they cannot fix." Diana met her gaze steadily. "I'm not most people." A faint smile touched the housekeeper's lips. "No, you're not." She moved to the window, hands clasped behind her back. "His Grace has not been the same since she fell ill. The guilt eats at him. He blames himself for not seeing the signs sooner, for not finding the right doctor, for..." She trailed off. "For surviving when she didn't," Diana finished quietly. Mrs. Pemberton looked at her, surprised. "Yes." Diana joined her at the window, watching the wind chase leaves across the lawn. "Tell me about her," she said, "before, when she was well." The housekeeper's expression softened with memory. She was bright, full of laughter. She loved music, would play the pianoforte for hours, and she adored His Grace. You could see it in the way she looked at him, the way she'd light up when he entered a room. Diana's chest tightened. "What changed?" Mrs. Pemberton hesitated. "I don't know. It was gradual." She began sleeping poorly, complaining of headaches. She'd forget conversations we'd had that morning. At first we thought it was simply stress, the pressures of managing a household, of being a duchess. When did it become clear it was more than that? The night she tried to leave, Diana turned sharply. "Leave?" She packed a bag, dressed for travel, and tried to walk out the front door at 3 in the morning. When His Grace stopped her, she didn't recognize him. Screamed that he was keeping her prisoner, that she had to get away before they found her. Before who found her? She never said or couldn't. After that night the decline was swift. Mrs. Pemberton's voice dropped. Within 6 months she was, as you see her now. Diana's mind raced. Did she have any enemies? Anyone who might wish her harm? The housekeeper's brow furrowed. Why would you ask that? Because healthy minds don't simply shatter. Something, or someone, broke hers. Mrs. Pemberton paled slightly. You think she was poisoned? I think it's possible. Silence stretched between them. Then, His Grace's cousin, Edmund, stood to inherit if the Duke died without an heir. But he's always been loyal. I cannot imagine. Where is Edmund now? In London. He visits occasionally, but... She stopped, something shifting in her expression. He was here, during the worst of it. Stayed for several months to help His Grace manage the estate. Diana's pulse quickened. Did Isabel's condition worsen while he was here? Mrs. Pemberton thought carefully. Yes, she said slowly. Yes, it did. But that could be coincidence. Stress from having a guest. Or opportunity, Diana murmured. The housekeeper looked alarmed. Your Grace, these are dangerous accusations. I'm not accusing anyone yet, but I intend to find the truth. Mrs. Pemberton studied her with a mixture of concern and respect. You care for him, she said quietly. For His Grace. Diana's breath caught. Did she? She thought of Victor's haunted eyes, his careful control, the way his voice softened when he spoke to Isabel, even knowing she wouldn't remember, the way he'd touched her cheek that night in the library, as though she were something precious and fragile. Diana struggled for words. I care for justice, and for those who've been wronged. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Mrs. Pemberton nodded slowly. Be careful, Your Grace. If you're right, if someone did this deliberately, then you're placing yourself in danger by investigating. I know, and you'll do it anyway. Yes. The housekeeper's lips curved into a sad smile. Then you and His Grace are well matched, both too stubborn to know when to walk away from a fight. That evening, Diana sought Victor in his study. She found him at his desk, surrounded by ledgers and correspondence, a half-empty glass of brandy at his elbow. He looked up as she entered, surprise flickering across his face. Diana, is something wrong? No. I need to speak with you. He set down his pen, giving her his full attention. She closed the door behind her, then moved to stand across from him. I've been thinking about Isabel's illness, she began carefully. His expression shuttered. Diana, hear me out, please. He gestured for her to continue. You said her decline was gradual. That it began with small things. Forgetfulness, headaches, sleep disturbances. Yes. Those symptoms are consistent with poisoning. Victor went very still. Poisoning, he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. Certain substances, administered over time, can mimic mental illness. Belladonna, for instance, or... I am aware of what poison can do, Diana. He rose from his chair, his control fraying at the edges. Do you truly believe I didn't consider that? That the doctors didn't test for it? Did they? Yes, repeatedly they found nothing. What if they weren't looking for the right substance? What if you are grasping at shadows because you cannot accept that sometimes there are no villains? His voice rose. That sometimes people simply break and there's no one to blame, nothing to fix. Diana stepped closer, refusing to back down. And what if I'm right? What if someone did this to her deliberately and they're still out there free while she rots in that tower? The words hung between them, brutal and true. Victor's hands clenched on the edge of his desk. If you're right, he said quietly, then I failed her in ways I cannot even comprehend. I let someone poison my wife under my own roof, and I was too blind to see it. You're not omniscient, Victor. You can't protect against threats you don't know exist. I should have known. His voice cracked. I should have seen... Stop! Diana moved around the desk, standing directly in front of him. This is not your fault. Do you hear me? Whatever happened to Isabel, whether it was illness or poison or some combination, you did everything you could. He looked down at her, his eyes raw with pain. Did I? Because from where I stand, I see a man who locked his wife in a tower and married another woman while she still draws breath. The guilt in his voice was suffocating. Diana reached up, cupping his face in her hands. A bold gesture, improper, but she didn't care. Listen to me, she said fiercely. You gave Isabel safety when she could not keep herself safe. You protected her from asylums that would have treated her like an animal. You visit her every day, even though she doesn't know you. That is not failure. That is love. A shudder ran through him. I don't know if I love her anymore, he whispered. I don't know if what I feel is love or guilt or simply grief for who she used to be. It can be all three. And what does that make me? Human. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. For a long moment they stood like that, close enough to feel each other's warmth, The world narrowed to just the two of them. Then Victor's hands came up to cover hers. "You asked me once why I agreed to this marriage," he said quietly. "You said the king commanded it." That was true, but not complete. He opened his eyes, holding her gaze. "I agreed because I was tired of being alone, tired of living in a house full of ghosts. I thought perhaps a wife in name only would be bearable, a companion who asked nothing of me." Diana's heart stuttered. "And now I find myself wanting things I have no right to want." His voice was rough, honest. "I find myself thinking of you when I should be thinking of ledgers, listening for your footsteps in the hall, wondering what you're reading, what you're thinking, whether you—" He stopped abruptly as though realizing he'd gone too far. But Diana didn't pull away. "Whether I what?" she whispered. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "Whether you regret being here." "I don't. You should. I don't regret many things, Victor, but I won't regret this." The air between them crackled with something dangerous and inevitable. Slowly, so slowly she could have stopped him at any moment, he lowered his head. His lips brushed hers, tentative, questioning. Diana answered by rising on her toes, closing the distance, kissing him with a certainty that surprised them both. It was not a passionate kiss, not urgent or desperate. It was something quieter, deeper, a promise exchanged in the language of touch. When they finally pulled apart, Victor rested his forehead against hers, breathing unsteadily. "This complicates everything," he murmured. "I know. We shouldn't—" "I know that too," he smiled faintly. And yet I choose this. I choose you." His arms came around her, pulling her close, and for the first time since arriving at Thornfield Manor, Diana felt something she hadn't expected to feel again: hope. Diana woke the next morning with purpose burning in her chest. The kiss lingered in her memory, Victor's hands gentle on her face, the quiet intensity in his eyes, the way he'd held her as though she were something worth protecting. But beneath the warmth of that memory lay something colder, a question that refused to be silenced. What if someone did this deliberately? She dressed quickly and made her way to the library, pulling down every medical text, every journal on toxicology she could find. If Isabel had been poisoned, there would be clues. There had to be. Hours passed. Diana read until her eyes burned, taking notes, cross-referencing symptoms. Belladonna, dilated pupils, hallucinations, confusion, violent behavior. Arsenic, digestive issues, skin discoloration, hair loss. Mercury, tremors, memory loss, personality changes. Laudanum overdose, drowsiness, confusion, respiratory distress. None fit perfectly, but several shared overlapping symptoms with what Victor had described. She was so absorbed in her research that she didn't hear the door open. "You missed breakfast." Diana looked up to find Victor standing in the doorway, holding a tray with tea and toast. Her heart did a small, traitorous flip. "I wasn't hungry," she said, though her stomach chose that moment to growl. His lips quirked. Liar. He set the tray on the desk, then glanced at the scattered books and papers. "You're still investigating?" "Yes." He pulled up a chair beside her, his expression serious. "Show me what you found." Diana hesitated. "Victor, if I'm wrong, then we've wasted time reading. But if you're right—" He met her gaze. "If you're right, then someone took my wife from me. And I want to know who." The steel in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. She turned her notes toward him. "I've been looking at poisons that cause gradual mental deterioration. The problem is mostly physical evidence, discoloration, organ damage, things the doctors would have noticed. Unless they weren't looking for it," Victor said quietly, "or unless someone ensured they wouldn't find it." Diana's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "The doctors who treated Isabel, they were all recommended by Edmund." The name landed between them like a stone. "Your cousin?" "Yes." Victor's jaw tightened. He arrived shortly after Isabel's symptoms began. Said he wanted to help. Brought specialists from London, expensive treatments. Treatments that made her worse. Some did, yes. But I thought— He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "I thought we were simply trying everything. Desperate to find something that worked." Diana's mind raced. Victor, where is Edmund now? London, as far as I know. He visits occasionally, but after Eleanor died, he stopped coming as frequently. Does he stand to inherit if you die without an heir? Victor's expression darkened. Yes, the title, the estate, everything would pass to him. And you have no children? No. Diana leaned forward. Victor, think carefully. Did Edmund have access to Isabel's food? Her medicines? He went very still. He used to bring her tea in the afternoons, said it would help her sleep. Victor's voice dropped to a whisper. God, it was right in front of me. We don't know for certain, don't we? He stood abruptly pacing. He had motive, opportunity, and the moment she was locked away, unable to speak coherently, he stopped visiting, because his work was done. Diana rose, placing a hand on his arm. If this is true, we need proof, not just suspicion. How? Isabel can barely remember her own name, let alone what happened years ago. Diana thought quickly. Mrs. Pemberton said Edmund was here during the worst of Isabel's decline. The household would have kept records, deliveries, visitors, expenses. If he was purchasing unusual substances, there might be receipts. Victor's eyes sharpened. The estate ledgers, they're in the East Wing. The East Wing you forbade me to enter. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I'm reconsidering that rule. The East Wing was exactly as Diana had imagined. Dark, cold, abandoned, dust cloths covered furniture, portraits stared down from the walls with disapproving faces. The air smelled of disuse and secrets. Victor led her to a locked door at the end of the corridor. Isabel's rooms, he said quietly. I haven't been inside since... He didn't finish. He unlocked the door. The room beyond was frozen in time. A woman's sitting room, elegant, feminine. Books lay open on tables. Embroidery sat half-finished in a basket. A vase of dead roses stood on the mantel, their petals long since turned to dust. Diana's throat tightened. This was where Isabel had lived. Before the ledgers, she asked gently. Victor moved to a writing desk, pulling open drawers. Diana wandered the room, taking in the details. Paintings of landscapes, sheet music for the pianoforte, a journal lying open on a side table. She picked it up carefully. The handwriting was elegant but deteriorating, the early entries neat and even, the later ones shaky, words misspelled, sentences trailing off mid-thought. She read, June 12th, 1822. Edmund arrived today. Victor seems relieved to have help managing the estate. I confess I find his presence unsettling. He watches me in a way that makes my skin crawl. But Victor trusts him, so I must try. Diana's heart pounded. She flipped forward. July 3rd, 1822. The headaches are worsening. Edmund brought me a tonic from London. Says it will help. It tastes bitter, but I drink it, because Victor worries so. July 20th, 1822. I cannot sleep. When I close my eyes, I see shadows, hear voices. Edmund says it is the fever. He brings me tea each afternoon. It helps, but only for a little while. August 8th, 1822. Something is wrong. I know it. But when I try to tell Victor, the words tangle. Edmund is always there, always watching. I don't trust him. I don't... The entry ended abruptly, the pen trailing off the page. The next entries were illegible, scrawled fragments, barely coherent. Diana's hands shook as she turned to Victor. She knew, she whispered. She knew Edmund was poisoning her, but she couldn't make you understand. Victor looked up from the ledgers, his face pale. I found receipts, he said hoarsely. Purchases from an apothecary in London. Belladonna extract, mercury compounds, laudanum in quantities far exceeding medicinal use. All substances that could cause her symptoms. All purchased by Edmund. Victor's voice was dangerously quiet, and signed off as medicinal supplies for the Duchess. Diana crossed to him, placing the journal in his hands. He read it, his expression growing darker with each line. When he finished, he closed the journal carefully, as though it might shatter. I let him do this, he said. I trusted him, welcomed him into my home, and he destroyed her. Victor, I should have seen it, should have questioned. He was your family. You had no reason to suspect. That is no excuse. His hands fisted around the journal. She tried to tell me. And I didn't listen. Diana took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. "Then listen now," she said fiercely. "We have proof. We can stop him. We can make sure he never does this to anyone else." Something shifted in Victor's expression, grief giving way to cold, focused rage. "We need to contact the authorities, have him arrested." "Will they believe us? The testimony of a woman they consider mad and a husband they might think complicit?" Victor's jaw clenched. "Then what do you suggest?" Diana thought quickly. "We need a confession, something undeniable." "How?" An idea formed, dangerous, reckless. "Invite him here," she said. "Tell him you're considering changes to your will, that you want his counsel. You want to bait him. I want to give him enough rope to hang himself." Victor studied her, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. "You are terrifying when you scheme, you know that? I'll take that as a compliment." He almost smiled. Then his expression grew serious again. "If we do this, you stay away from him. I won't risk—" "I'm not fragile, Victor. I know. But I've already failed to protect one woman I care about. I won't fail again." The words hung in the air between them. "One woman I care about." Diana's breath caught. "Victor." He pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I know this is impossible," he whispered. "I know I have no right to feel this way. Not while Isabel still lives." "But Diana, you have become essential," she finished softly. "Yes." She tilted her head up, brushing her lips against his, a brief, aching kiss. "Then we do this together," she said. "We bring him to justice, for Isabel, for Eleanor, for all of us." Victor's arms tightened around her. "Together," he agreed. That evening, Victor composed a letter to Edmund. Diana watched him write, her mind already planning. They would need to be careful, clever. Edmund was dangerous, a man who had spent years slowly poisoning someone, who had watched them deteriorate without remorse. But he was also arrogant, and arrogance, Diana knew, was a weakness waiting to be exploited. When Victor sealed the letter, he handed it to a footman with instructions to have it delivered immediately. Then he turned to Diana. "It will take 3 days for him to arrive, assuming he comes. He'll come. Men like him can't resist the chance to secure their victory." "And when he arrives?" Diana's expression hardened. "When he arrives, we make him confess, whatever it takes." Victor searched her face, as though memorizing it. "You are remarkable," he said quietly, "and brave, and I—" He stopped, as though the words were too heavy to speak. Diana understood. Some truths were too fragile to name aloud. Not yet. Not while so much remained unresolved. But they were there, unspoken, hanging in the air like a promise. 3 days, she said softly. 3 days. That night, Diana climbed the tower stairs one last time. Isabel was awake, sitting by the window, staring out at the moonlit gardens. She looked up as Diana entered, a faint smile on her lips. "You came. I told you I would." Isabel patted the floor beside her and Diana sat. "I had a memory today," Isabel said quietly. "A real one, not the shadows." "What did you remember?" "Music. Someone was playing the pianoforte, and I was dancing." Her eyes grew distant. "I felt happy, whole, like I was someone who mattered." Diana's throat tightened. "You do matter, Isabel. You always have." "Do I?" She turned, her blue eyes searching. "Or am I just a ghost people keep locked away?" "You're not a ghost. You're a survivor." Isabel's expression crumpled. "I'm so tired of surviving," she whispered. "I want to live again. I want to remember what that feels like." Diana took her hand gently. "Soon," she promised. "Soon you'll have justice. And maybe with time you'll have peace." Isabel looked down at their joined hands, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me." Diana squeezed her hand. "Always." 3 days felt like an eternity. Diana spent them preparing, memorizing every detail of Edmund's receipts, rehearsing conversations, steeling herself for what was to come. Victor grew quieter, more focused. The easy warmth that had begun to bloom between them hardened into something colder, sharper. He was preparing for war, and Diana was his willing soldier. Edmund Ashford arrived on a grey afternoon, his carriage rattling up the drive with an air of casual confidence. Diana watched from the window as he stepped out, tall, well-dressed, handsome in a cold sort of way. His smile was easy, practiced. He looked like a man who had never questioned his place in the world. Her stomach turned. Victor met him at the door, clasping his hand with a warmth Diana knew was false. "Edmund, thank you for coming on such short notice." "Of course, cousin. Your letter sounded urgent." Edmund's gaze swept the entrance hall, then landed on Diana with sharp curiosity. "And this must be the new Duchess. How delightful." He crossed to her, bowing with exaggerated courtesy. "Lady Diana, I've heard so much about you." Diana offered a polite smile, keeping her voice light. "All good things, I hope." "The best." His eyes lingered on her a moment too long. "Victor is a fortunate man." Something in his tone made her skin crawl, but she held her composure. "We're both fortunate," she said smoothly. Victor stepped between them, subtle but deliberate. "Come, Edmund. We have much to discuss. Diana, would you ask Mrs. Pemberton to prepare tea?" It was dismissal, and they both knew it. But Diana nodded graciously and left the room. She didn't go to find Mrs. Pemberton. Instead, she moved to the corridor outside Victor's study, positioning herself where she could hear without being seen. Inside, Victor poured brandy, his movements calm. "You're looking well," Edmund said, settling into a chair. "Marriage suits you." "Does it? You seem lighter, less burdened." Victor's hand tightened fractionally on the decanter. "Perhaps, though burdens have a way of lingering." "Isabel, you mean?" The name dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water. Victor turned, his expression carefully neutral. "Yes, Isabel." Edmund's face arranged itself into sympathetic lines. "How is she?" "Unchanged." "A tragedy." He sipped his brandy. "I still think you should consider a proper institution, Victor. Keeping her here, it's not healthy. For either of you." "She stays here." "But she stays." Victor's voice was steel. "This is not a discussion." Edmund raised his hands in mock surrender. "Of course. Your decision." He paused. "Though I confess I'm surprised you remarried while she still lives. Some might consider it improper. The king commanded it. I had no choice." "Ah, yes. Royal decree." Edmund smiled. "Convenient, that." Victor set down his glass with controlled precision. "What are you implying?" "Nothing. Merely observing." Edmund leaned back, studying him. "You mentioned in your letter that you were reconsidering your will." There it was. The bait. Taken. "Yes," Victor said slowly. "With the new wife, my circumstances have changed. I need to ensure proper provisions are made. Of course, and your heir. When the time comes." Edmund's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "And if it doesn't? If, God forbid, something were to happen to you before, then the estate passes to you, as it always would have. A responsibility I pray never falls to me." The words were smooth, practiced. "But if it does, know that I would honor your legacy." Victor moved closer, his voice dropping. "Would you honor it?" Something flickered in Edmund's expression, too fast to name. "What do you mean?" "I mean, cousin, that legacies are built on truth. And lately, I've been uncovering some troubling truths." Edmund went very still. "I don't follow." "Don't you?" Victor pulled the estate ledgers from his desk, opening them to the marked pages. "These are your purchases. Belladonna, mercury, laudanum, enough to poison a household." Edmund's face paled, then flushed. "Those were medicinal supplies for Isabel, you know that." "Do I?" Victor's voice was dangerously soft. "Because I also found this." He placed Isabel's journal on the desk. Edmund's gaze dropped to it, and Diana saw fear flash across his face before he schooled it away. "A journal proves nothing. She was delusional. She was lucid when she wrote this. Lucid enough to know you were poisoning her." "That's absurd. Is it?" Victor leaned forward, his control fracturing. "You came here when she first fell ill. You brought doctors who made her worse. You fed her substances that destroyed her mind piece by piece until she couldn't remember her own name. You're mad. And then you waited." Victor's voice rose. "Waited for her to be locked away, silenced, while you positioned yourself as the devoted cousin, the helpful heir. Waiting for me to die childless, So you could claim everything. Edmund shot to his feet. This is insane. You're grieving, paranoid. I'm awake. Victor moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. For the first time in years, I see clearly. And what I see is a man who destroyed an innocent woman for money and a title. Edmund's mask finally cracked. Innocent? He laughed, bitter and sharp. She was healthy. She could have given you an heir at any moment and I would have lost everything. Edmund spat the words, his face twisting with greed. But a mad wife keeps you trapped, Victor. Married but childless. No heir meant the estate would eventually come to me. It was a perfect plan until the king forced this new bride on you. The admission hung in the air, damning. Victor's expression went cold. So you did it. Edmund seemed to realize his mistake. He stepped back, hands raised. I didn't mean... You poisoned her. I had to. The words burst out, desperate. You were going to have children, and I would be left with nothing. I needed the estate, so I... He stopped, breathing hard. So you decided for me, Victor finished, his voice like ice. You took her mind, her life, and you thought I'd never know. Edmund's face twisted. You weren't supposed to care this much. She was just a woman. There are others. He didn't see Victor move. One moment they were standing apart. The next, Victor had him by the throat, slamming him against the wall. Just a woman. Victor's voice was barely human. She was my wife, and you destroyed her. Edmund clawed at Victor's hands, gasping. Diana burst into the room. Victor, stop! He didn't seem to hear her. His hands tightened, fury and grief and years of guilt pouring out in a single savage moment. Victor, Diana grabbed his arm. He's not worth it. He's not worth becoming a murderer. The word penetrated. Victor's grip loosened fractionally. Edmund sucked in air, his face red. We have his confession, Diana said urgently. The authorities will handle him. Don't give him the satisfaction of dragging you down with him. For a long moment, Victor didn't move. Then slowly, he released Edmund, shoving him away with disgust. Edmund collapsed against the wall, coughing. You'll hang for this, Victor said quietly. I'll make sure of it. Edmund laughed, a broken, desperate sound. You think they'll believe you? A mad woman's journal and some receipts? I'm a peer of the realm. You have no proof. We have your confession, Diana said coldly. Every word you just spoke. Edmund's eyes widened. You tricked me. We gave you the chance to tell the truth, Victor said. You chose to damn yourself. Edmund's expression shifted, panic giving way to something darker. His hand moved to his coat. Victor, Diana shouted. Edmund pulled a pistol, leveling it at Victor with shaking hands. I won't hang, he said, his voice ragged. I won't... The shot rang out. But it wasn't Edmund who fired. Mrs. Pemberton stood in the doorway, a hunting rifle in her hands, smoke curling from the barrel. Edmund's pistol clattered to the floor. He looked down at his shoulder, blood spreading across his coat, his face pale with shock. You shot me, he whispered. Yes, Mrs. Pemberton said calmly. And I'll do it again if you move. She turned to Victor. I sent for the constable when I heard shouting, Your Grace. He should be here within the hour. Victor stared at her, something like disbelief crossing his face. You were listening? I've run this household for 30 years. I know everything that happens within these walls. Her gaze hardened. Including poison. Edmund slumped to the floor, clutching his wounded shoulder, all fight gone. Diana moved to Victor, placing a hand on his arm. He was shaking, rage, relief, grief, all tangled together. It's over, she said softly. It's over. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her as though she were the only thing keeping him upright. And perhaps she was. The constable arrived with 2 men. They took Edmund away in chains, his protests falling on deaf ears. The journal, the ledgers, the confession, all would be presented to the magistrate. Justice would be served. But as Diana watched the carriage disappear down the drive, she felt no triumph, only exhaustion, and a deep, aching sadness for all that had been lost. That night, Victor climbed the tower stairs. Diana waited below, giving him privacy. She didn't know what he would say to Isabel. How do you tell someone that the person who destroyed them had been caught, that justice had come, too late to undo the damage? When Victor finally descended, his eyes were red. I told her, he said quietly. I don't know if she understood, but I told her. Diana took his hand. She understood, she said. On some level, she knows. He looked at her, his expression raw. What do we do now? We heal, Diana said simply. All of us. As best we can. Victor pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Stop saying that. It's true. No. She pulled back, meeting his gaze. You deserve peace. You deserve happiness. You deserve a life that isn't haunted by ghosts. His hand came up, cupping her cheek. And if my ghosts won't leave, then we'll face them together. He smiled, small, broken but real. Together, he echoed. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Diana believed they might actually survive it. 1 year later, spring came to Thornfield Manor like a benediction. The gardens, once wild and neglected, bloomed with careful cultivation. The windows, long shuttered, stood open to let in light and air. The portraits in the halls no longer seemed to watch with judgment, but with quiet acceptance. The house had learned to breathe again, and so had its inhabitants. Diana stood in the renovated east wing, sunlight streaming through freshly cleaned windows, illuminating the room that had once been Isabel's prison. It was a sitting room now, comfortable, welcoming. Books lined the shelves. Watercolors hung on the walls, bright landscapes painted by a hand that was slowly, painstakingly remembering how to hold a brush. Isabel sat by the window, her blonde hair neatly braided, her face turned toward the garden below. She looked thinner still, fragile, but there was color in her cheeks now, clarity in her eyes. She would never be who she was before. The poison had taken too much, damaged too deeply. But she was no longer lost in shadows. Good morning, Diana said softly. Isabel turned and a smile, small, tentative, real, touched her lips. Diana, you came. I always come. I know. Isabel's fingers twisted in her lap. I remembered that this morning. That you come every day. That you've been coming for... She paused, concentrating. A long time. Over a year now. A year. Isabel tested the word. That's a very long time to be kind to someone. Diana's throat tightened. It's not kindness, Isabel. It's friendship. Is that what we are, friends? Yes. Isabel looked down at her hands, then back up, something vulnerable in her expression. I'm glad, she whispered. I don't have many of those. Diana sat beside her, close, but not crowding. They had learned over these months the delicate balance, closeness without pressure, presence without demands. How are you feeling today? Diana asked. Better. The headaches are less frequent, and the voices... Isabel paused. They're quieter. Sometimes they don't come at all. That's progress. Dr. Whitmore says so. Isabel's fingers found the fabric of her dress, pleating it absently. He's kind. Not like the others. Dr. Whitmore had been Diana's choice, a young physician from Edinburgh who specialized in disorders of the mind, who believed in patience and compassion rather than bleedings and restraints. He had been working with Isabel for 6 months now, slowly, carefully, helping her piece together what remained. He says I may never remember everything, Isabel continued softly, that some things are gone, lost in the darkness. That's all right. Is it? Isabel looked at her, eyes shining with unshed tears. How can it be all right when I don't remember my own wedding? When I look at Victor and feel nothing? No recognition, no love, just absence. Diana's heart ached. This was the cruelest part. Victor visited Isabel weekly, spoke to her with gentleness and respect, never pushed for more than she could give. But she did not remember him, not as her husband, not as someone she had once loved. The poison had stolen that too. Isabel, Diana said carefully, the love you felt, it existed, it was real. And even if you can't remember it, it shaped who you were, who you are. But it's gone now. Some things are. But you're still here, still fighting. That matters. Isabel was quiet for a long moment. Then, he's in love with you, you know. Diana's breath caught. Victor, he tries to hide it, but I see the way he looks at you, like you're the sun and he's been living in darkness. Isabel, it's all right. Isabel's smile was sad but genuine. I don't remember loving him, but I remember what love looked like. My sister, Eleanor, she used to look at the physician's son that way. Before, she trailed off. Before she died caring for you, Diana finished gently. Yes. Tears slipped down Isabel's cheeks. I killed her, didn't I? By being broken? No. Diana took her hands firmly. Edmund killed her. He poisoned you, and grief killed Eleanor. But you are not responsible for what was done to you. Isabel's shoulders shook. Diana pulled her close, letting her cry. For Eleanor, for herself, for all the years stolen. I want you to be happy, Isabel whispered against her shoulder. You and Victor, you deserve it. We can't, not while I what, exist? Isabel pulled back, wiping her eyes. I release him, Diana, from whatever vows we made that I don't remember. He's been faithful to a ghost long enough. That's not for you to decide alone. Then I'll tell him myself. And she did. That afternoon, Victor came to visit as he always did, bringing books, speaking softly, asking nothing. Diana started to leave, to give them privacy, but Isabel stopped her. Stay, please. Diana looked at Victor, who nodded. She settled into a chair by the door. Isabel turned to Victor, her expression clearer than Diana had ever seen it. I need to say something, she began, and I need you to listen without interrupting. Victor's brow furrowed. Isabel, please. He nodded. She took a breath. I don't remember you. I've tried, God knows I've tried, but the man you were to me is gone. I know you were my husband. I know you've cared for me, protected me, even when I didn't know my own name, and I'm grateful. Victor's jaw clenched, but he remained silent. But you're not my husband anymore, Isabel continued softly. Not in any way that matters. And I won't let guilt chain you to someone who can't love you back. You don't have to. I do. Her voice was firm. You deserve to live, Victor. To love someone who can love you fully. And Diana. She looked at Diana, her expression tender. Diana has given me more kindness than I had any right to expect. She visits me, reads to me, reminds me that I'm still human when the world would prefer to forget. Tears burned Diana's eyes. So I'm telling you both, Isabel said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. I release you, from duty, from guilt, from the past. Build something new, something beautiful. You have my blessing. Victor's composure finally cracked. He knelt before Isabel, taking her hands gently. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely, for not seeing what Edmund was doing, for not protecting you, for... Stop. Isabel's fingers tightened around his. You did everything you could, and you've given me a life worth living, even if it's not the one I had before. That's enough. Is it? It has to be. Victor bowed his head, and Diana saw his shoulders shake. Isabel looked at Diana, her eyes full of quiet understanding. Take care of him, she whispered. He breaks more easily than he looks. Diana nodded, unable to speak. That evening, as the sun set over Thornfield Manor, Diana found Victor in the garden. He stood beneath the oak tree where she'd first walked, staring out at the horizon. She approached slowly, standing beside him in comfortable silence. She's extraordinary, he said finally. After everything, the poison, the pain, the years stolen, she still finds it in herself to offer grace. She learned it from you. He looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. From me. You kept her safe when others would have abandoned her. You visited her even when she didn't know you. You never stopped fighting for her. Diana stepped closer. That's where she learned what grace looks like. Victor's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. How to move forward. How to be happy when so much has been lost. One day at a time, Diana said simply. One moment of choosing life over grief. He turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. I love you, he said, the words raw and honest. I've loved you since you climbed those tower stairs without fear, since you looked at Isabel and saw a person, not a problem, since you stood beside me and demanded truth when it would have been easier to run. Diana's heart soared. I love you too, she whispered, not despite the ghosts, not despite the scars, but because of who you are when you face them. He kissed her then, not tentative or careful, but deep and sure, a promise sealed in touch. When they pulled apart, the sky was painted in shades of gold and rose. "What do we do now?" Victor asked. Diana smiled. "We live," she said. "We build. We let go of what we can't change and hold tight to what we can. Together, always together." 6 months later. Winter was harsh that year, but inside Thornfield, there was peace. Isabel passed away quietly in her sleep, just as the first snowdrops bloomed. Her heart, weakened by years of poison, finally gave out. She died knowing she was loved, holding Diana's hand. We buried her beside Eleanor. She was finally free. And when spring came, the small chapel had been restored. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass. Diana stood at the altar in ivory silk. Victor stood beside her. This time, there was no king's command, no secret in the tower, only choice. "I do," Victor said. "I do," Diana echoed. And as they kissed, legally and truly husband and wife, it felt like dawn breaking after the longest night. That evening, Diana stood in the library, the room where she'd first begun to uncover the truth, where she'd first kissed Victor, where so much had changed. Victor came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking?" he murmured against her hair. "That we survived," she said softly. "Against all odds. We survived." More than that, his lips brushed her temple. "We're living." She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. "Yes," she said, "we are." Outside, the gardens bloomed. Inside, the house settled into peaceful warmth. And in the tower that was no longer a prison, Isabel slept soundly, her dreams free of shadows. Thornfield Manor had been a tomb, but it had become a home, and in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.
I walk through halls of whisper lies, where shadows breathe and silence cries.
They told me love was buried here, but I still feel it drawing near.
A castle built of grief and stone, a marriage vow but all alone.
Yet in the dark I sense the truth,
A broken heart still beating youth.
I never meant to bring you pain.
These walls still echo her last name.
A past I cannot lay to rest, a haunted soul inside my chest.
I built my silence like a shield, afraid of what my heart might yield. If you should see what hides in me, would you still dare to stay
With me,
I hear a cry beyond the door.
a secret I can't hide no more.
If love must rise from shattered ground,
Then let the truth be what we found. Behind the tower light, where sorrow meets the night, we stand between the fear and flame, no longer bound by shame. If darkness calls your name, I'll hold you just the same. Through ashes, tears, and broken skies, loving just to live in pain.
But every truth you dare to show
Is healing wounds I didn't know.
the woman in the silent room deserved a kinder fate than doom. And though her ghost still walks these halls,
Thought my heart was made of stone.
our love was something I'd outgrown.
But in your eyes I see release.
A fragile kind of quiet peace.
If fire comes to claim the night, I swear I'll stand, I swear I'll fight. No more running from the past.
If you will stay, I'll choose at last.
Behind the tower line,
No more afraid of night.
we break the curse, we face the flame and never turn away. If ashes fall like rain, we'll build our hope again. Through every scar, through every scar.
Together we choose the dark.